longtime listeners to this podcast will absolutely cackle when I share this exact Slack message I got from Brandon regarding today's episodes. He told me, hey, I need some direction. Quote, my top 4 quote unquote long shots bets are all awards picks, but those are also the exact same 4 awards best bets I would make because that's how I do futures best bets.
Yeah, I mean that it is what it is. I am not looking to make a bet or to come on a podcast and say, well, here's who I think is going to win, therefore you should bet it. I'm always going to play the number. And for a lot of these bets, I'm looking at 40 to 1 that my numbers say this should be 12 to 1, or 60 to 1 where I think it should be 30 to 1. And that for me is always going to be a better bet than the guy at 7 to 1 where I'm like, yeah, he would be my pick straight up, but I'd still make his odds 10 to 1 because it's a crowded field. So I'm just going to play the number. And for me, if you play enough of these and play the numbers enough, then it's going to be a winning ROI in the long run. But it is the long run. It is a long futures game. We might sprinkle 10 long shots in NBA, add to my 10 in NFL, and we'll be happy if we hit one of them for the season. You got to be willing to lose a lot on these, but if you hit that one out of 20, you probably are still coming out ahead with some of the angles we're looking at here. So we'll get to some of the award picks when we do an awards best bets show, but those are the picks I like best. These are the numbers I like.
2 things I do want to kind of talk about here up front with regards to this. The first thing is we've talked about in the past the cash out value on some of these, where if it shortens, you get value. I will say that I've noticed books getting a lot more stingy on cash out value. It's one of the reasons why I actually kind of like parlaying the awards picks is that reaches a point where it's not like that risk factor. If you are right on it, will often lead to them being like, okay, we'll let you out of it with a big profit because of the exposure risk that we have. At NBA MVP, for example, last season, like your cash out opportunities were almost nil because it was a close race. And so they weren't willing to go ahead and take any diminished value return on these. And so at the books I had, that's something to keep in mind, that your cash out value, I think, on these is decreased. One of the things I think that's good about futures betting, and there's a lot of, look, the professional bettors, the reason they operate game by game is they don't want to tie up their money for 6 months, right? You don't want to basically work for 6 months and then have to wait another 6 months. You work for a month, right? You put hard work in for a month, you put in all these bets and you hope that you get to the end of it. And then that's your bread and butter for the year. That's not how it works, right? So like they'd rather play it game by game, adjust it as it goes along. I do think that one of the keys in the futures market is it is a market where you do not have to have market confidence. And what I mean by that is you can think a line is off, but if you think a line is off, you probably think that NBA line is off by a point and a half, 2, maybe 3, right? If you're at a 3-point edge, then you should absolutely be betting. If you're a 2, we talked about this with Raheem.
There's your 5-unit play if you've got that sort of edge.
Yeah, like you have an edge there. But there's a certain confidence I think you have to have in the market, especially as the market reacts to the numbers that are laid, right? If the number goes from Sixers -5 to Sixers -3, it doesn't mean that you can't bet, right, on the Sixers. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't bet on the Sixers if that's your cap. What it does mean is that you should have some confidence of the reasons overall why the market is trending that way, at least in my opinion. Some people go the other way where they're like, no, they don't know anything. I'm going to play against them. I don't think that these lines are accurate. The futures market in particular, though, I do think it's heavily influenced by perception. It's heavily influenced by narrative. And I do think in large part, the bookmakers are often on these odds firing blind on some of these, at least. And so I think that's one reason why I think there's value where you can find.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it just makes sense if you think about it, because you think of the number of bets coming in and the number of people playing, an opening night NBA game or any NFL game ever. And of course, there are way more bets. There's way more numbers. There's so much more ways we can definitively diagnose exactly what sort of sharp number we expect on this. And that's why a half point or a point is a real margin when it comes down to those. We don't have that for these. And in some of like the award cases, it's literally narrative. It's storytelling. There aren't numbers for storytelling. We can find numbers that correlate with it, and we talk about them. But yeah, it only makes sense that a night to night game, the lines are going to be a lot sharper because there's a lot more reasons to hone in on it. And especially for me, that's the appeal now back to long shots, is because I think in a lot of these markets, especially like an MVP market, the lines for the first 5 or 10 guys are pretty sharp because we've had the whole offseason. It's a big conversation. Everyone's talking about it. Even though the narrative thing plays in, we're cutting in on what the number looks like. And really, too, if we're being honest, we're kind of undercutting. Like a lot more and more with some of these futures, the top handful of guys just don't have value. The numbers are just too short because they know they don't really want to take on a huge wager in that way. But at a long shot, when you're at 60 to 1, 100 to 1, 200 to 1, a real long shot, like how 60 to 1 to 40 to 1, the difference is literally like a half percentage of implied value. Yeah. Humans don't understand, like none of us, myself included, know how to comprehend, is there a 0.5% less chance value for this guy to win MVP than that guy? So by definition, those numbers are off. And importantly here, you've got to shop around on these for a long shot, especially because like if you want to take Luka for MVP, that's great. You can take him. He's the favorite. You're going to find a similar number at every book because that's like they're all kind of competing with each other on it. Some of these long shots, you'll see 20 to 1 at one book, 50 to 1 in a different book. So make sure that you look around because that's where a lot of the value is just getting value on the right price too.